Hello everyone, today I'm going to be talking to you about filmmaking. So I ask you all one thing, to go back to your childhood and watch that one movie for the first time that you watched and somehow just swept your childhood brain into another world, and you are just sitting there glued to the TV, endlessly pondering how that just happened in 2 hours and how you just experienced the entire universe and life and how that came to be. For me, when I was 7 years old, and I'm sure only about one or two other people, that movie was Star Wars for me. Because when I saw this for the first time, my 7-year-old brain was blown away by the fact that George Lucas and a group of few other people managed to create an entire galaxy that apparently existed a long time ago, far, far away, in 1977 with just a few cameras and a few props. That was pretty mind-blowing to me, because since that day, it has been cemented in both my heart and my brain that I would love to be a film director, or just someone in general who wants to craft a wonderful story for other people to, admire and enjoy. Unfortunately though, like most people, I kind of fell under the assumption that movies were easy to make and was no real big deal at all, and you didn't have to have these two guys' last names, Tarantino or Spielberg, to do so. The only problem is, once I did it for the first time, I realized just how much I was wrong, because it is very hard and very difficult, and it is a very tedious effort. But the beautiful thing about film production is that, as hard as it may be, it is an incredibly rewarding experience, and I'm here to talk to you about the three main functions. And that includes things such as this, and also it starts with pre-production. And pre-production, in my own words, sorry about that. First thing, all right. So the way I break down pre-production is the idea of you having a story in your head and having it, kind of flounder around, and you think you have an idea of what it is for about a year or two, until you finally decide to get down in front of a piece of paper and try to write down the story and realize you have nothing. But for those who are professionals in the field and actually do know a thing or two, for instance, Masterclass, the type of school that is taught by filmmaking legends such as Martin Scorsese or Aaron Sorkin, who is a very famed screenwriter, they define pre-production as an essential phase of filmmaking processes that involve budgeting, scheduling, casting, and hiring crew members before production, which is absolutely correct. Because from what I know about pre-production, it's mostly struggling with money and budget and while writing the script. And that is the entirety of what pre-production is, which is fine, and it's a very important integral part of the process. The problem is that pre-production is very, very finicky, and it takes a very long time to do. And the big thing about pre-production that Masterclass also states is that effective pre-production can help you save time and money, the two most limited resources in filmmaking when shooting your project, which is absolutely true, because the two things that you wish more than anything you have while shooting a project is having all the time in the world and all the money in the world. But apparently not a lot of people want to give you that money and time, which is pretty offensive. So you have to try to get the money and the time that you can, which is why this phase is so important and it takes so long, because you're trying to plan out everything as best as you can. Because after you get the budgeting and the script writing together and you finally have everything together, the next thing you have to do is start storyboarding. And storyboarding, in layman's terms, is basically the script of the camera. You're just drawing out the shots, having the general idea of how each thing is going to be looking and how it's going to look on screen in the shots, whether it be a medium close-up, a far-away shot, an establishing shot, so on and so on. And then after that, just figuring out how you're going to shoot it, and it saves a lot of time during the next phase, which I'll talk about later. Because then, at that point during pre-production, once you have the storyboard figured out, next thing you're going to be doing is hiring your crew members, and you're going to be finding locations to shoot in at this point. And after that, you're just going to be going from there and figuring out, at this point, how you're going to roll into production once everything is gathered together. And the New York Film Academy also describes pre-production and also gathering everything. And they also let you know, more than anything, something that I didn't know myself when I was actually going location scouting, is that you need permits. They are very important, because according to the New York Film Academy, the New York Film Academy states, permits are required for municipal governments to shoot on public property. And you'll also need insurance to protect yourself in the event that you or one of your crew members accidentally do damage to the location and your rented equipment, which is something I never kept in mind, because apparently I have destructive mindset when shooting videos, and I never thought about that, which means, yes, permits are something that's very important, and I'm now going to keep in mind for the future whenever I decide to be shooting a project. And pre-production then at that point is a wrap, and we get brought into production, my personal favorite part, because all the tedium and length that comes with pre-production is finally rewarded and paid off because your efforts are finally being brought into reality that was merely just in everyone's head up until this point. And to quote Charles Bueller from the Institute of Production and Recording, his definition of production is the quickest and sometimes shortest portion of filmmaking and digital media production. And I respect that quote more than anything because it just perfectly complements the tedium that comes with pre-production because it's so quick. If everything is planned out properly, pre-production can be one of the quickest phases that happen. All you're doing is shooting everything that you had planned out, and next thing you know, you're off to the third phase. The only thing that can really halt production as it's going are two things: the director and budget. For instance, for these two movies right here, for the original Jaws, the main issue in this movie, which is a beloved movie, it was plagued with production issues. The main issue that came with this was the budget. The Bruce the Shark, who's the original bad guy shark in the movie, he was a real pain in the butt to deal with on set, according to people that have worked on the movie, and it caused a litany of issues that halted the production and made it go on much longer than it has. And another example is the Fantastic Four reboot that I believe came out in around 2014. The director was apparently the real issue with that set. And the reason that directors can be issues is because communication is such a key function of production. Because the number one thing that you have to remember about film is that it's not just one person doing everything. It is a collaborative effort, and it takes lots of communication and being able to voice your mind and opinion to other people so you can get the end product that you strive for and that you want. And Bueller, who I mentioned earlier from the Institute of Recording and Production, agreed wholeheartedly, making it abundantly clear on his website that directors must be clear about their visions. Filmmaking is a collaborative process, and nowhere is the collaboration more important than during the production phase, because everything in the pre-production phase and the next phase that I don't want to mention, which most people probably know about, can get completely ruined if the production goes south, because it's the middle piece, and if that falls, the two around it fall as well. But if production goes well because of a smoothly planned pre-production, or if a lot of people like to storyboard and make things go very well as production goes on, then production is very short, easy, and it can be a very fun experience for everyone involved, and a very incredibly satisfying as one too. Which brings us to our third phase, and my personal least favorite phase from someone who's had to go from it. That brings us to post-production. Post-production, in layman's terms, is just the editing and the finalization of everything in the end. The only reason I hate it personally is because I am very picky with how I like things, and I'm not a big fan of editing. But I know this is where really movies are made or broken, right here. So, sorry, I lost track of my cue cards here. So, going back to Masterclass, the school I mentioned earlier that hosted a lot of great minds and talents from the film industry, they define post-production as the editing of audio and visual materials to create a film, which is a short definition, but honestly, that really encompasses everything about post-production. It really is just taking all the pieces of the puzzle that were created in production and just putting them together. And it sounds a lot easier said than done because, well, it's not. Post-production, to me, is the hardest part because editing is one of the hardest things you could do. As you can tell, look at the setup they have to go through. And post-production, lots of other things created though too. It's not just editing, it's actually the sound. Most sounds that you hear in movies are done in post-production, done through either Foley, which is artificial sound. For instance, they'll make, I know in a lot of movies such as A Quiet Place, they'll take celery stalks and they'll crunch them like this to, for instance, simulate a bone being broken, or like a creak, or like a stick being broken or stepped on, or just something like that. Or also the orchestra. The music, the soundtrack being made in the movie, all of this is done in post-production. This is not something that's done as the movie's being filmed. This is done after everything is wrapped up and they're analyzing the footage that they have and the work that they did and wondering how to go from there. And just like that, and once everything is wrapped up, the music, the editing, the writing, and just everything in post-production is finished up, that wraps it up. And then at that point, you also, if you need any more examples that post-production is so important, Star Wars was saved in the post-production process with just the editing alone, and that wraps it up. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you all learned maybe a thing or two about about filmmaking, and I hope I didn't just come across as really arrogant as someone who really loves movies and doesn't know how to stop talking about them, because I can't wait to share a story one day. And for anybody else that wants to share a story too, I can't wait to see it, and I'm sure so many other people can't either. Thank you so much for attending my speech, and thank you.